is me. I've got it here. Here we go.
Good morning. My name is Ryan Stewart. I'm a friend of Laura's. Laura's one of my closest and dearest, oldest friends. And on behalf of Laura and Marianne and Monica, I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate the life of Robert Wayne Frazer, or Bob, as we all know him. Marianne and Laura and Monica really do want today to be a time to celebrate who Bob was and how Bob loved. While they know that grief will come in its time, their wish is for today to be about joy and remembrance. They also want to thank those who traveled in to be here and those online who are joining us, I understand, from around the globe, in Europe and in Asia, as Bob truly touched people around the world. We'll hear from several people today, including Bob's two daughters, about Bob's life, his service, his career, and his family. After which, his family is inviting those of you here to join them for refreshments afterwards, to share stories about your time with Bob. At this time, Bob's eldest daughter, Monica Irvine, will join us for a blessing by Michelle Buhite. This was a blessing that was used by the chaplain to comfort Marianne, Laura, and Monica at the time of Bob's passing, so it carries special meaning for them. Monica.
She's shorter. Shorter than most people. Okay. A blessing for the dying. We bless you on your journey. We honor and celebrate the life that has been yours, the lives you've touched, and the legacy you leave. We release old wounds and regrets. We forgive and are forgiven. We cherish the life that we shared, the life that is larger than us. Out of mystery we are born, and mystery receives us when we die. With sorrow and gratitude for all that has been, we bless you on your journey.
Thank you, Monica. Bob's time in the Army, first in the ROTC, then active duty during Vietnam, and then the Army Reserves, was an important part of Bob's life. His time serving in Bangkok shaped who he was, and so we're joined here today in person by three soldiers, and I'm sure more online, who served under Bob in the Signal Battalion. He considered them brothers, and their closeness continued through their lives. Phil Reese represents them here to share a bit about their time together. Yes. There you go.
Thank you, Brian. You all have to forgive me. I've written my remarks because I know if I didn't stay focused, I might lose it. Bob was very special to all of us. Mary Ann, Laura, and Monica, folks, I'm delighted to be here with several veterans who served with Bob in the 334th Signal Company in Bangkok, Thailand. Bob was our commanding officer, we called him the CO, who had a wonderful first sergeant and 6 officers who reported to him. Ron Rummel, his executive officer, and Mike Strain, the radio division officer, and then succeeded me as operations officer, are here along with me. I was his operations officer and planning officer during those times. The others, First Sergeant Poe, Chief Warrant Officer LeBrake, and Lieutenants Lake and Singer are not here as they have either passed or cannot be here for medical reasons. It is that time of life for all of us, and I know Bob would understand. We loved Bob Frazer unreservedly, and he returned that affection. See what I mean? We became brothers in a time of war and bonded so completely that across the years, when we saw each other from time to time, we picked up where we left off. We were young then, all under 25 except for the first sergeant and the warrant officer LeBrake. We were given the responsibility of running an independent signal company of 450 soldiers and civilians serving the military and State Department's activities in Bangkok, among others. And it was our good fortune to be led by a very competent and thoughtful electrical engineer, Captain Bob Frazer. I was doubly fortunate in that he chose to become my roommate, and we became best of friends. Bob was a natural-born leader. He had to be because he was dropped into a very responsible position with really very little training or preparation. He demonstrated great integrity from the get-go, and his word was his bond. He led from the front, not from the back. It was our backs that he had, and we depended on that. He was not a micromanager, but one who empowered you to do your job and made sure we had what needed to get it done. He was a low-key, humble, but firm when the situation demanded it. He had a wry sense of humor, something that was essential if you were to survive some of the bureaucratic nonsense that the Army could dish out from time to time. We took great pride in responding to extraordinary requirements laid on us by higher headquarters, and in the process, occasionally having to re-engineer their staff work to get the project done properly. A case in point was the setting up of a command and control center for the Commander-in-Chief Pacific, Admiral John S. McCain, the Senator's father, in a Thai hotel. Admiral McCain headed a command of 85 million square miles from the Aleutian Islands in the north to the Antarctic Circle in the south, and from the west coast of North and South America all the way over to the Indian Ocean, and 1.4 million troops. And he kept command wherever he was, so what we were doing was absolutely vital. He was also an alternate launching authority for the single integrated operation plan, which if we went to war, a nuclear war, he was one of the 3 people the president would go to and link up and tell him to execute. So it was a pretty significant operation that we were dealing with. We did it, and the Admiral summed it up in a message to General Ott, the Army commander in Bangkok, and I have a copy of that message which I will leave with you, Mary Ann. While in Bangkok for the CETO meetings, communication support was provided to me by Captain R.W. Frazer, United States Army, and his 334th Signal Company. What they managed to accomplish in setting up a secure communication station in the Chafia Hotel and maintaining it in a faultless operation around the clock surpassed anything I have ever seen. This could only have been done through the exceptional ingenuity and professional skill of Captain Frazer and his executive officer, Captain Ron Rummel. His operations officer, First Lieutenant P.S. Reese, assisted by Lieutenant Strain and Lake, as well as Chief Warrant Officer LeBrake. The leadership these officers provided ensured that the entire communication setup ran smoothly and with utmost efficiency, despite the very high volume of traffic being handled. I commend Captain Frazer, the officers and the men of his company in the highest terms. Such absolutely outstanding performance of duty reflects the very great credit on your command, as well as on the U.S. Army Signal Corps. Well done, Admiral John S. McCain, Jr. I think that sort of says it all about what Bob was doing out there. It was our good fortune to have been together with Bob 10 years ago in Las Vegas, and then most recently in Wilmington, Delaware in June. In those places, we renewed the bonds of respect and affection for Bob, which will endure until the end of our days. All of us joined me in saying to Mary Ann, the girls and wider family, that you have our sincere condolences and deepest sympathy at the loss of Bob. He was a dear friend, a brother, in fact, for whom we will always have a special place in our hearts. God bless him and you all. Thank you. Now Mr. Swain has a limerick.
Well, I'm of Irish descent, and so limericks are quite appropriate at events like this. And I can guarantee you it's not bawdy at all. And the pictures. So here we go. It says, there was once a man named Bob who was the right man for the job. He was an expert on wine. With this elixir he liked to dine, but was by no means a snob. For us in Bangkok, he was the CO. His Monday morning staff meetings were always a go. They were held to a Tommy James tune coming from the King's Hotel Saloon. After the meeting, it was to Just Mag we would go. Bob liked to run. However difficult, he considered it fun. A lot of us thought he was crazy. Maybe we were just lazy. Whatever the outcome, he won. Bob retired in Cali from HP. Some years later, he moved to Tennessee. In the South, he was surprised to see snow. This meant less grass to mow, for Nashville came his home to be. So here we are today, honoring a man who has gone away. Let us lift our glass to a man who had class. Rest in peace, Bob Frazer, we say.
After Bob's time in Bangkok, he moved to Colorado, attending CSU as an electrical engineer, and then joining Hewlett-Packard in Loveland. He spent the rest of his 30-plus year career at the company, first HP, then Agilent. Many of Bob's friends and colleagues from his time there are here today in person and online, and the families asked Bob's close friend, colleague, and former boss, Mike Gasparian, to talk about Bob's career and what Bob meant to them.
I have a prop for later. So I met Bob when I moved to the Loveland Instrument Division in 1987. And it's really an honor to be the person to speak about Bob today. He was a very interesting person with several different sides. Initially, I knew Colonel Bob, so hearing about his life in the Army starts to make a little more sense. But Colonel Bob was an extremely focused driver personality, a real work colleague who helped us accomplish so much for Hewlett-Packard. But over time, I learned the other side of Bob, which was a much softer side. It turns out this guy with the super hard shell was actually one of the kindest humans on the planet. He had a true passion and value for long-term relationships, and my relationship with Bob evolved into a friendship that I truly valued and lasted for many, many years. Over the past few days, I've reached out to many of Bob's close colleagues and friends, and so I've put together a number of their thoughts as well. So in the early days of working with Bob, we had formed what was called the Personal Measurements Operation. It was focused on developing, marketing, and selling HP's basic electronic instruments. Bob had real expertise in the development of a new sales channel for these products. According to Ken Coffran, and Ken worked in the United States Sales Organization, this model of selling ultimately evolved into what is now Keysight's call center, selling and supporting customers over the phone, through the web, through video, and Bob's fingerprints were all over this new breakthrough approach. Bob was always trying to improve the concept, making it better and more effective. Ken really enjoyed working with Bob over the course of many years on this project. He commented to me that they often switched gears and talked about families, as they both had daughters that were about the same age. Ken went on to say it was clear that Bob adored his wife, Mary Ann, loved his daughters, and was so proud of all their accomplishments. Another aspect of Bob was his ability to adapt to different cultures and work internationally. And I can't think about Bob's career without thinking about Susumu Tokunaga-san in Japan and Hans Herbert Strohmerader in Germany. Bob had long-term relationships with both of these colleagues. They remained friends for many, many years. The next section I have is from one of his close friends from Loveland, Marsh Faber. They were longtime colleagues together. And this was entitled, Bob, a Myth in Loveland. As far as we can tell, Bob was a mythical beast. I believe he was once spotted briefly on the Loveland campus. He was running by, training for another Boston Marathon. Then, of course, he was gone for the week of the Boston Marathon. And then he was gone for a week to recuperate from the Boston Marathon. But his marathon times kept improving, spurred on, no doubt, by the thought of Mary Ann passing him on the very next hill. Shortly after one of these marathons, he moved to Europe, become the European Marketing Center manager. His biggest accomplishment was learning how to say good morning in Dutch. He returned to Loveland regularly on his way to Hawaii, where he served his country in the Army Reserves in charge of strategy. At one point in time, Marsh and John Ryder tried to convince Bob there was a sinister plan to invade New Zealand that would cause imbalance in the Asia-Pacific region. But Bob quickly recognized the ruse, denied the request, and proceeded to move to Hong Kong to become the Asia-Pacific marketing manager. Bob truly circled the globe, visiting Boston for marathons, beans, and lobsters, and then he would go to Hawaii for Ono and Mai Tais. He always waved to us in Loveland on his way to Sonoma, where he served as head sommelier. You can tell by this narrative that we all love to poke fun at Bob. It was easy to do so, as he was so intense about everything. He was a bulldog. No matter the problem, he wanted to attack it, crush it, do it in minimal time. And this was especially true every time he returned from the Army Reserves. He quickly morphed into Colonel Bob, barking orders. One day, he tried this with John Ryder at the coffee pot. After Bob's tirade was complete, John smiled, looked at him, and said, "You know that won't work on me, right?" Bob smiled, and this smirk emerged. The smirk was the best thing I remember about Bob. He could be gruff 1 second, and then the sideways smirk would emerge into a smile. Beneath it all, he was one of the kindest people I knew and had a genuine concern for all the folks around him. He will be sorely missed. I have a couple comments from Grant Drankow. The Bob memory that stands out for me is related to our move to Amsterdam back in the HP days. Janine and I had been over to Europe house hunting and found a great place to live. However, when it was time to move, the landlord informed us that the previous residents could not move out for a few months. We were in a real jam. At the time, we had 2 small kids. Janine was 7 months pregnant, and flying back to Amsterdam to look for a house was not an option. Well, Bob and Mary Ann really rescued us. They quickly found an apartment near the office that we could rent for a few months, and with tons of help from both of them, The move went well, and we look back on our 4 years in the marketing center as one of the highlights of our marriage. I have another comment from a European colleague, Peter Kassenbacher. Peter said, I distinctly remember my first business dinner with Bob and Hans Herbert Stromberater. It was a little Italian restaurant in Bublingen, and Bob made me order my very first filet gorgonzola. At dinner, Bob told us about a meeting he had with CEO John Young. The meeting was all about starting a new telesales channel for basic instruments in Germany. I remember Bob as an old-style manager, very disciplined. I knew he once served as colonel in the U.S. Army, so I expected him to have rigid behavior and hierarchy thinking. But I was very surprised. He treated a newcomer like me with respect, interest, and trust. And when he retired, he shared his home address and invited me to visit. I always wanted to go, but I never got the chance. The last story from a gentleman named Arjen van Bremen, who I didn't know, but maybe you remember him. Because I worked for Bob in the European Marketing Center at the start of my career. He appointed me into my first manager's role and then increased my responsibility. He also enrolled me in the LEAD program. He was a true mentor, and I am grateful for the time we worked together. He was also a very nice person, let me develop by learning instead of telling me what to do. But what I remember most about Bob was actually Mary Ann. She made the most amazing chocolate chip cookies for us on a regular basis. She does. And then Scott Sample, who's here in the office, Scott and I had a short conversation, and just real briefly, Scott passed on a story. He said, you know, when Lynn was pregnant with our twin girls, it was a very, very tough situation. Both Lynn was in trouble as well as the girls, and Bob never left my side during this whole ordeal. He really taught me how a manager should handle a crisis and support an employee. I always valued this support and this lesson that I learned from Bob. So let me go back to some of my personal experiences, and then I'll close. It was really interesting how my relationship with Bob evolved. First, it was all work and no play. Then Bob and I started running together, training for races. And next came wine. Bob taught both Scott Sample and I about good wine. And I'm pretty sure that Bob discovered French Bordeaux wines during his time in Amsterdam. But don't even think about talking about French Bordeaux without highlighting Chateau Gloria. So here is a bottle of Chateau Gloria. Bob easily could have been like a spokesperson for this winery. I think he was one. He was the biggest fan of Chateau Gloria on the planet. He literally wrote wine reviews about each vintage for us. Then I remember, and this was a long process, we found a distributor in New York City where we could order magnums and double magnum-sized bottles of Chateau Gloria. So that's 6.6 bottles of wine in each double magnum. And no matter where Bob was on the planet, he would call me up in Loveland and tell me that Apple Jacks in Denver had just received a shipment of Chateau Gloria, and could I go there and pick up a case for him? So we always popped a cork of an older vintage of Chateau Gloria when we got together. And in fact, this is I actually did go to Apple Jacks. I did get a case, and it was a case of 1988 Chateau Gloria, which we drank every bottle together whenever we would meet, whether it was in California or Loveland. And this is the very last bottle that I have, so it's yours. Another fun memory is Bob got me into making wine, so I actually made wine in my basement, and I invited Bob and Scott Sample over to help me blend the 3 different varietals that we had. Well, Bob went into Colonel Bob mode. He took over, he was in charge. He got shot glasses, and he started pouring and mixing, and he was really good at it, and he did have a seriously good palate. And the wine ended up being called 30 Fathom Red, and it was from 2006. It was easily the best wine that I had ever made. The last story that I'll end with is about Estancia Meritage. So I don't remember who actually discovered this wine, but it became a huge favorite for Scott, Lynn, my wife Denise, Mary Ann, and Bob. But we quickly wiped out the entire stock of this Estancia Meritage in northern Colorado, and so it became this legendary wine in our minds. So a few years later, ironically, Bob found this wine during a trip to Hawaii on one of his Army Reserve trips. He was so excited about it that he wrote a poem about it. So yes, another Bob poem. And I thought this would be a fitting way to end, because it's a great poem. So it's entitled, "'Twas the Night That We Landed." "'Twas the night we landed on Waikiki Beach. We drank several Mai Tais, but found them too sweet. So off to the air base we flew with a dash to see what the wine shop had in its stash. Then what to our wondering eyes should appear but 12 bottles of Estancia amongst all the beer. Upon closer inspection, it was Meritage indeed. The vintage was 95 and the price was 23. I opened my suitcase and shoved stuff aside, but try as I might, only 5 bottles fit inside. So for breakfast, for lunch, and for dinner we sipped, till the other 7 were empty, and boy were we ripped. Since you couldn't be here to share in this find, we created this toast with you four in mind. So to Lynn and Denise, to Scotty and Mike, happy Estancia to all, aloha and good night. Bob Frazer." So that was one of our favorite poems. So here you go.
Bob's youngest daughter, Laura Peterson, will now deliver the eulogy.
Okay. Lefty Lucy. Okay, Monica, you have to come fix it. All right, so while I'll let Peter fix it. While Peter does that, so I'm really thrilled that you're all here today to talk about Dad. There is a poem that some good friends in California sent. I'm going to make my best friend Amy read it because it's going to ruin me, so I'm going to make her do it so that I can talk. So, Amy, if you would.
A reading from Henry Scott Holland from the Canon of St. Paul's Cathedral. Death is nothing at all. I have only slipped away into the next room. I am I and you are you. Whatever we were to each other, that we still are. Call me by my old familiar name. Speak to me in the easy way, which you always used. Put no difference in your tone. Wear no forced air of solemnity or sorrow. Laugh as we always laughed, at the little jokes we enjoyed together. Pray, smile, think of me, pray for me. Let my name be ever the household word that it always was. Let it be spoken without effect, without the trace of a shadow in it. Life means all that it ever meant. It is the same as it ever was. There is unbroken continuity. Why should I be out of mind because I am out of sight? I am waiting for you. For an interval, somewhere very near, just around the corner. All is well.
Thank you, Amy. Not sure I was going to get through that, so I elected not to call an audible and not try. All right, so Mike and Phil and I did not compare notes, but you will see some themes emerge. So many of you over the last weeks have shared with us what Dad meant to you. His humor, his work ethic, his compassion, his warmth, and what a tremendous friend he was. As I would expect, most of you, and know after that, have experienced firsthand, Dad also loved a joke, a skit, a poem, and so thank you, Mike, for setting the tone. It wouldn't be a send-off for Dad if it wasn't also a little bit of a roast. So you'll ask your indulgence and forgiveness as we get through this. So Dad's childhood started as what I would consider pure Midwest, Council Bluffs, Iowa. There's a song about Council Bluffs, which he remembered all the way to the end. My cousins are smiling because they sort of, yeah. So Dad and I sang it to some nurses just a couple weeks ago, and there's enough tears in the room that I will not repeat that performance. But he was an all-American, all-around little boy, Bobby, as he was called. He looked like the beaver, If you take a look at some of the pictures of him growing up, he was a lifeguard, he played softball, ruled in checkers, loved his golden retrievers, and loved his Black Beauty books, which I think our boys now have. Monica and I have also discovered, as we've gone through boxes over the last several weeks and months, either girls in Iowa liked giving random boys pictures, or Bobby was also a little bit of a ladies' man, apparently. So it's been fun to see some of the different sides of him. So after that start in Iowa, Dad, as you heard from Mike and others, truly became a global citizen, and he has certainly infected me with that bug. And I know for Marianne, Monica, and I, he showed us the world. He gave us the gift of so many adventures, from hiking Horsetooth in Fort Collins to Uncle Morris and Aunt Fern's pig farm in Iowa, to taking us to Berlin, little known to him, the year before the wall fell. Marching us through countless European cities at Colonel Frazer pace, as our little legs are sprinting to keep up. See, for the you guys know, Colonel Frazer lived throughout the entire time and affected all of us. So he also loved Asia and the Pacific region immensely. You've heard several things about Hawaii. I think it was probably his favorite place. He spent time there with both the Army and family. We'll always treasure our family Thanksgiving trip where Peter learned to surf, and Dad taught us about Mai Tais at Duke's and watching for the green flash. When I took Logan to Bangkok for the first time, just a couple years ago, Dad was on the phone with us every single day, once or twice, talking about our experiences, and I could hear in his voice how much he wanted to scream through the phone, come with us, and drag us to all his old haunts. After sitting with the Army guys last night, I'm not sure I wanted to go to all his old haunts, but it would have been fun nonetheless. Europe was another chapter, and it brought endless road trips along the Rhine, looking for Nessie as we explored the Frazer family seat in Scotland that I think he swore we were going to inherit someday. Cultivating his love affair with French wine, which we've also heard about, and he enjoyed sharing with so many of you, which I now know for a fact was often in excess after that story, Mike. We learned there's always more to do and more to see, that travel is a gift, and it shapes who we are. And one of the biggest lessons I learned from Dad is you better not pack a bag that you can't put in the overhead bin by yourself. Dad also, as you've heard and know, had a flair for the dramatic at times, whether it was a joke, a poem, doing a skit, which, by the way, for our dear friend Roberto, who I think is online, I have several of your Agilent name badges because I understand he liked to impersonate you in meetings. So I'll get those back to you next time I see you. So. And on a memorable trip to Rome, he walked Monica and I through the Colosseum and the Forum, impersonating Julius Caesar reincarnated. I might have believed him, I don't know. Narrating personal anecdotes as he walked around, and very likely telling us a completely inaccurate view of Roman history. But it sounded good. Dad would go to any length to show his love for you. Many of you remember when I was 35 weeks pregnant, and Dad came to help with some ridiculous DIY project. Not the one we asked him to come help with, by the way. He wanted a different one. Before the baby came, and he managed to fall off the roof. But what most of you may not know is that we do have a family theory, that he did so to secure the naming rights of his first grandson. So we now have Logan Robert Peterson. We did tell him in the ER, we like, Dad, you could have just asked. That would have been okay. But he loved surprises. So Monica and I flew to Amsterdam often as unaccompanied minors. United to Chicago to KLM over, and they would escort you out through immigration and have you show an ID, right? Like they had to make sure you're getting to the right person, especially across borders. There was one time where we came off the plane and I looked down the terminal and all of a sudden Dad's there, like by the gate. You think about security protocols now, he wasn't supposed to be there. I sprinted past the airline personnel who were very confused, jumped into his arms, and they ruefully said, I don't think we need to check ID, I think you guys are good. Turns out he put on a suit, grabbed his briefcase, his old passport, a passport and an old boarding pass, shoved it inside, and just marched that Colonel March right up to immigration, flashed his boarding pass and passport right past like he was heading on a business trip to make sure that he could surprise his girls. There's several more stories about him passing security guards at Versailles and other things, so we can talk about those later. But And so when you thought of Bob Frazer, you clearly thought introvert. The first word that came to mind. That man could and would make friends literally anywhere with his trademark greeting of, "Hey, guy," or for some of you, there was a more colorful replacement to the word guy, as I understand it. He was a welcome phone call, always with a good story, a genuine interest in your life, wanting to hear about your problems, your business, what you ate that morning for breakfast some days. He instantly put people at ease, and he was insistently determined that you would be friends. He gathered and rallied the troops for fun, whether that was at work, obviously in the Army, at the Coast Guard Center in Petaluma, with the Santa Rosa HOA. There's a story in there about goats that we can also tell later. Or on the circuit of the wine country runs, where he was a regular on the podium. I promise I'm almost done, Monica. Almost. But as I speak about running and making friends, one of my favorite stories about Dad, which is like super quintessentially Bob, and as we were talking about with the guys from the Army last night, I'm not going to let the really fine details get in the way of a good story right now. One of these Boston marathons that he and Marianne were running, Dad was trying to figure out a place to spend some time at the starting line. She just shook her head because she figured out where I was going. He, wanted to know where they could sit, they could stay warm, they could have breakfast. So Dad pulls up Google Maps, finds the starting line on Google Maps on his computer, looks at, circles that, prints it out, circles the house. They travel to Boston. And my father walks, the day or two before the marathon, walks up to this house, knocks on the door. Person answers, and he says, "Hey, I'm wondering if my wife and I can spend time on your porch before the marathon. We're both running, and the starting line's chaotic. We need somewhere to relax, eat, whatever." And the person looked at him like he was crazy, which I think is how we looked at him when he shared this story with us. They ruefully declined and shut the door. Undeterred, Bob walks to the next house, knocks on the door, repeats the performance, and this time he finds a kindred spirit, which he always managed to somewhere. Not only is he going to hang on the porch with Marianne, they got invited in, they could use the bathroom, they could eat food together, new BFFs, and not only did this couple stay in touch, they traveled out to California to see Dad and Marianne and became friends off of a really inappropriate Google Map-driven knocking episode. So only my father, and they certainly broke the mold when they made him. At the core of it, he adored his family. I have heard from many of his cousins, his siblings, nieces and nephews, that he was the disseminator of family news, also this disseminator of a lot of joy. He was an amazing grandfather to Aaron, Logan, Pearson, and Marshall, a wonderful father-in-law, and a very sweet brother, full of laughter, pride, and caring. All right, we're going to do this part. To his beloved wife and our stepmom, Marianne, 37 years of marriage, an incredible story. We have so many fun memories of family dinners, birthday celebrations, vacations, you two dancing around the living room. Through the twists and turns that life brought, and we know they always bring ups and downs, you stuck together and you took care of each other. And most especially in this last chapter, you took amazing care of him, for which Monica and I are eternally grateful. Since a young age, I've often been told I'm my father's daughter. And my goodness, I hope that's true. It's such a compliment and something that I'll always strive to be. We remain inspired by his focus, his incredible work ethic, his determination, bordering on stubbornness sometimes. Yes, Monica, I did get that, thank you. Deep compassion for those he loved, the core belief that he was going to fix things, his drive for service, his courage in jumping into a new challenge, a new city, a new home, a new role, and most of all, his caring, his warmth, and his humor. He had an incredible life, and he was a leader in all he did. And there have been times where I've been unsure what awaits us. I do now feel certain that Dad is sitting somewhere having a good bottle of Bordeaux or 3, reunited with people he loves, and cheering on every single one of us. On behalf of our family, thank you for loving him, for being part of the rich tapestry of his life and of ours, and for sharing our amazing father, grandfather, and husband with us. I'll end with what he often said about those he admired most. Now we'll say it about him. He was an absolute prince of a guy, and we will all miss him very much.
Right, well, thank you for joining us to celebrate Bob and his life. It's so evident that Bob loved and was loved by so many. For those here in person, the family invites you all to spend some time together, and Laura's also arranged a meeting place afterwards for anyone who wants to raise a glass of something stronger to Bob. Thank you.
I do have a Wi-Fi password from the folks if anybody needs that. You can come to me.